Hey guys, good evening. I hope all of you are having a wonderful day. So this is me, Siva Prasad, back with yet another video on NCERT science textbook. So in the previous lesson, we started our discussion on class 7 NCERT science textbook. In the first few minutes, I'll just be quickly showing you the slides that were discussed in the previous class. And in case you have missed out the previous video, I would highly encourage you to go back and watch the same. So today we will be taking up the leftover topics. So we'll be talking about different types of reproduction, asexual reproduction, and we'll be talking about reproduction plants in today's lesson from class 7 NCERT Science and Technology textbook. So yesterday we started our discussion on heat, on the concept of thermodynamics. I told you about various ways in which heat can get transferred. We talked about conduction, we talked about convection, we talked about radiation. Then I told you about wind. Wind is nothing but air in motion. We started our discussion on the concept of air pressure. I explained to you what exactly is this air pressure and why the air pressure decreases as we go up and what happens to the air pressure when we go down, right? Then following that, we talked about high pressure, low pressure. I told you that wind always moves from high pressure regions to low pressure regions, and I told you how the velocity of the wind is dependent on the difference in temperature between high pressure and low pressure regions. Then following that, I gave a quick overview of the monsoon mechanism in India and how it is based on the pressure system. Then following that, we discussed about land breeze and sea breeze. Right, this is where you left off. There's a very interesting question to you on that day. I didn't explain this to you. These are concepts that you keep on hearing again and again. You would have heard people say that land heats up faster and land cools down faster compared to water. Why is the reason? If you see, if because of this differential heating, right, this is the reason that you have land breeze and sea breeze. If land does not get heated up faster in comparison to water, right, this concept of sea breeze would not occur, right? So the simple question I'm asking is, why is it that we say that the land heats up faster and land cools down faster? All right, so this is a question I'm asking you. You can try to type an answer in the comment section. I will be explaining it to you at the end of this video or when we'll be concluding with class 7 NCERT. As promised, today we will talk about reproduction in plants. We already talked about different parts of the plant when we discussed class 6 NCERT. In case you have missed that video, you can definitely go back and watch the same. As you know, plants, they have roots, they have stem, they have leaves, right? Roots, remember, they are absorbing water, right? They are absorbing minerals from the soil, etc. The roots are holding on, they are anchoring the plant to the soil. I told you about stem. Stem is responsible for conduction of water, food, etc. Right? Water is required by the leaf for the process of photosynthesis. So it is stem that is ensuring that water from the roots are taken to the leaves. Similarly, leaves are preparing food for the rest of the plant. This food has to be transported to different parts of the plant. This work is also done by the stem. Then I told you about leaves, where the process of photosynthesis takes place. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants make their own food through which they are able to carry on their metabolism, all the activities that they are supposed to carry on. These parts, if you see roots, stem, leaves, they are usually not engaged. They are not engaged in the reproduction in a plant, right? So therefore, these plants are called as vegetative parts of a plant, right? Those parts of a plant that are not engaged in reproduction, that is namely roots, stem, leaves, etc., these are called as vegetative parts of a plant. On the other hand, if you remember, I told you flowers are the reproductive part of a plant, right? Flowers are engaged in the process of reproduction. A flower, remember, it can have either just the male part or it can have just the female part. Female part is called as pistil, male part is called as anther. Right? So, if you can have a plant that only has the male part, or you can have a plant that only has the female part, or sometimes you can have a flower which has both the male part and the female part. Alright, so if it just has the male part or the female part, we call it as a unisexual flower. Both, if it has both, then we call it as bisexual flower. Alright. Let's talk about different types of reproduction. There is something called as asexual reproduction and there is something that is called as sexual reproduction. This is observed in human beings, right? Remember, in sexual reproduction, first of all, there are two parents that are involved. Two parents are involved in sexual reproduction, alright? Male and the female. The male will contribute the male gamete, that is the sperm. The female will contribute the female gamete, that is eggs. Both of them, they fuse together, right? This fusion of male gamete and female gamete, male gamete plus female gamete, this fusion process is called as fertilization. This results in the formation of something that is called as zygote. Alright. So this fertilization occurs only in sexual reproduction. Two parents are involved in sexual reproduction. Alright. If you talk about asexual reproduction, a single parent is involved. There are no fertilization taking place. Alright. In asexual reproduction, plants can give rise to new plants without seeds. Remember, seeds are a product of fertilization. Right. Since fertilization does not occur in asexual reproduction, that's why this kind of reproduction takes place without the need for any seeds. Okay, seeds, what are they? Seeds are a product of fertilization. If fertilization occurs, seeds are formed. यहाँ पे since fertilization is not occurring in asexual reproduction, reproduction takes place without seeds. There are some examples. Budding is an example. Vegetative propagation. These are all examples of different types of asexual reproduction. Alright. Sexual reproduction, as I told you, plants give rise to new plants with seeds. Alright, so we talked about the male part and the female part. Both of them will produce male gamete and female gamete respectively. Both of them will fuse together, and what you have is a fertilization process is taking place, which ultimately results in the formation of zygote. Right, that's what in sexual reproduction you see there is seeds. Seeds are involved. Alright. Alright, let's now talk about different types of asexual reproduction. Right, we'll talk about budding, we will talk about fragmentation, we will talk about vegetative propagation, etc. This particular question related to vegetative propagation, it was asked, if I'm not mistaken, in 2015 prelims examination. Okay, they directly lifted some content from the book and they directly asked that in the prelims examination. Alright, just like this year also 2020, they asked one thing directly from the NCERT class 8 book, that is basically a difference between a plant cell and an animal cell. Alright, let's talk about vegetative propagation. It is a type of asexual reproduction. That means automatically only a single parent is involved. Fertilization does not occur. There is no need for seeds. Okay, in which new plants are produced from roots, stems, leaves, and buds. So what did I tell you just a few minutes ago? I told you flowers are reproductive part of a plant, but roots, stems, leaves, etc. these are all vegetative parts of a plant. So in vegetative propagation, what happens is the reproduction occurs through vegetative parts of a plant. Right, through leaves. Okay, for example, you can see this is a leaf. From this leaf you can see new plant growing. Right, you can see this is roots. From this new plants are growing. Right, these are vegetative parts of a flower, vegetative parts of a plant, and still reproduction is occurring. So the reproduction is occurring through vegetative parts of a plant, and this is what we call as vegetative propagation. All right, from the name itself it is pretty obvious, it will be from vegetative parts of a plant. Okay, something special about vegetative propagation is that plants that are produced by vegetative propagation, they take less time to grow. Right, they mature faster. That's an advantage. They can bear fruits and flowers earlier than those produced from seeds. That means they are maturing faster. The plants that are produced by vegetative propagation, they are taking less time to grow, less time to bear fruits, less time to bear flowers. That means they are maturing faster than plants that are produced from seeds. The new plants, remember, they are exact copies of their parent plant. Why? Because they are produced from a single parent. For example, in human beings, if you see, we have certain features from our mother, certain features from our father. Because we have two parents involved, there is scope for greater variation. The prodigy can have some features of father, some features of mother. But यहाँ पे, if you see in vegetative propagation, this is a part of asexual reproduction. Only a single parent is involved. Right? So that is the reason you see the next generation plant is a complete ditto copy, exact copy of the single parent of the parent. Alright? This is the concept of vegetative propagation. This is a type of asexual reproduction. Let's talk about budding. This is another type of asexual reproduction. In this, the small bulb-like projections coming out from yeast cell is called as bud. Alright? I am giving you an example of yeast cell. This is a normal yeast cell. But over the period of time, as you can see, some kind of bud starts to develop like this. Can you see this? A kind of bud is starting to develop. A kind of bud is starting to develop. Right? You can have multiple buds also, as you can see in the last case. Or you can have a single bud like this. Right? This projection that you are seeing over here, this bulb-like projection you are seeing, that is called as budding. That's called as buds. Okay? So, in yeast cells, the reproduction takes place through budding. Right? This is a normal yeast cell. From here you are seeing there's a bud. The bud gradually grows and it gets detached from the parent cell, and then it forms a new yeast cell. What am I trying to tell you? This bud is initially formed. This bud starts to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. It starts to mature, and ultimately what happens is this bud gets detached from its parent. It becomes a single bud like this, right? So this becomes a new yeast cell, right? This is how new yeast cells are produced, right? This new yeast cell, okay, it will become like this. It will then grow, it will mature, and it will start to produce more yeast cells via this process of budding. Okay, sometimes there could be a chain of buds also, as I told you. See, sometimes another bud arises from bud, forming a chain of buds. For example, see, this is one bud. From here only, another bud is there, another bud is there, right? So that's what this is the process of budding. If this process continues, a large number of yeast cells are produced in a short period of time. Alright, this is another method of asexual reproduction. This is called as budding. Alright, let's talk about the next method of asexual reproduction. It is called as fragmentation. Right, fragment, the word you understand, right? Tuta tukda, tukdo tukdo mein baat rahe, those are called as fragments. If some item is broken, you say it is broken into multiple fragments. Let's try to understand what happens in fragmentation. This kind of process, it occurs in algae. Okay. Algae, they grow and multiply rapidly by a process that is called as fragmentation. An algae, what happens if this is a parent? This algae, it breaks up into two or more fragments. See, it has broken up into two fragments. One fragment is this, the other fragment is this. These fragments, they grow out as two new individuals. So that means you had a single parent. It broke into two. See, single parent. Let's say it broke into three. 1, 2, 3. Each of these three, they will grow out as new individuals. They will grow bigger, bigger, bigger. They will mature. Then they will undergo fragmentation and they will further reproduce. Alright. So this is the concept of fragmentation. This is yet another method of asexual reproduction. Okay. Alright. Then finally we have one more process. It is called as spore formation. What exactly are spores? Spores, remember, are asexual reproductive bodies. Alright, remember, these are asexual reproductive bodies. Sexual reproductive bodies are the seeds. Do not compare spores and seeds. Seeds are a product of fertilization. Seeds are a product of fertilization, the fusion of male and female gametes. But the spores are not so. Spores are asexual reproductive bodies. Spores are not a result of fertilization, right? So what are these spores? These spores are emitted by certain plants. Each spore, it is covered by a hard protective coat. Let's say this is a spore. It is covered by a very hard protective coat like this. Okay, this coat helps it to withstand unfavorable conditions like extreme temperature. This spore is able to survive. Low humidity, high humidity, too much amount of rainfall, flooding, etc. This spore is able to survive. So therefore, this hard coating ensures that the spore can survive for a long period of time. Alright. What happens is, these are unfavorable conditions. It is able to withstand unfavorable conditions because of its hard protective coat. Okay. But when you have favorable conditions, this spore, it starts to germinate and it develops into a new individual. So under favorable conditions like maybe rainfall, temperature, etc., from the spore, a new individual starts to rise. Alright, this is called as spore formation. Through spores, you are having the next generation produced. Okay, here also remember a single parent is involved, no fertilization is taking place. That's the reason this is also a type of asexual reproduction. Alright, plants like mosses and ferns, they reproduce by means of spores. Alright, so let me just summarize. We talked about 4 different types of asexual reproduction. One is called as vegetative propagation. We talked about budding, we talked about fragmentation, and then we talked about spore formation. Alright, let's now try to move ahead and let's talk about the process of sexual reproduction in plants. As I told you, if you have sexual reproduction, automatic, that means there are 2 parents who are involved. There is a fusion of male gamete and female gamete, and then there's this process of fertilization and zygote formation. Alright, flowers, remember, as I told you, are the reproductive parts of a plant. On the other hand, I told you leaves, stem, roots, etc. are vegetative parts of plant. We just discussed it as a part of vegetative propagation, right? Flowers are the reproductive parts of a plant. Alright, stamen are the male reproductive parts. I'm so sorry, I have written anther over here. Okay, anther is just a part of stamen, right? It is stamen. Okay, anther is just a part of stamen. I'll show you that, don't worry. If you see, the stamen is the male reproductive part, while the pistil is the female reproductive part. Alright. Flowers that contain either only a pistil, that is a female reproductive part, or stamen, that is a male reproductive part, they are called as unisexual flowers. Right? That means you have a flower, remember, not plant, flower. You take a single flower, you will see just a pistil or you will see just a stamen. Such flowers are called as unisexual flowers. On the other hand, you can have flowers which have both the stamen and pistil. They have the male productive parts also, female reproductive parts also. This is called as a bisexual flower. Alright, just try to remember this is what a unisexual flower and a bisexual flower mean. Let's try to understand how the process of sexual reproduction takes place in plants. Anther, which is basically, this is basically a stamen. Okay. This is basically pistil. Alright, this is stamen, this is pistil. Anther, it contains pollen grains which produce male gametes. Alright. Anther, which is this part of stamen, it produces male gametes, right? It is producing these male gametes. Pistil, on the other hand, it has a stigma. As you can see, this opening is called a stigma. This elongated part, it is called a style, and this part is called as an ovary. Alright. Inside this ovary, you will see that basically the ovary contains one or more ovules. Okay? The female gamete or the egg is formed in an ovule. So in this ovule only, you will see there is this egg. Okay? This is the female gamete. Alright. In sexual reproduction, what has to happen? This male gamete has to fuse with this egg, that is the female gamete, right? So when they fuse together, the process of fertilization occurs, and this results in formation of something that is called as zygote. Alright. This fusion is something that is central to this for this process of sexual reproduction to occur. Alright. So let's try to understand how this exactly occurs. So as I told you, anther is producing this male gamete, right? This ovule, inside this ovule you have this female gamete X. Both of them have to fuse together. How does this fusion take place? How does this male gamete reach these female gamete? Let's try to understand the process that is called as pollination. Alright. Pollination kya hai? Basically it is the transfer of pollen. Okay. Pollen is nothing but this. This male gamete, this is contained in this pollen. Alright. This pollen, it has to be transported to the stigma, from where it will go and fuse with the eggs. Right? So this process of transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma of a flower, stigma is present in the pistil, right? Pistil of a flower, it is called as pollination, right? You might have heard this terminology a lot, pollination. Pollination means transfer of pollen from anther to stigma of a flower. This is called as pollination. Alright. There are two types of pollination that can occur. If the pollen lands on the stigma of the same flower, it is called as self-pollination. That means we are having a bisexual flower. Alright. So let's take an example of this flower. As you can see, this is the anther, that means stamen is there, right? This is the stigma, that means this is pistil. So it has both male parts and the female parts, right? Let's say a pollen is produced by this. Pollen is produced like this. This pollen is now transferred to the stigma. So as you can see, this is happening in the same flower. Such kind of pollination, when it occurs, it is called as self-pollination. Alright? That means pollen from the anther is directly landing on the stigma of the same flower. Right? It's not going to a different flower, it is the same flower we are talking about. Such cases are called as self-pollination. Alright? On the other hand, this pollen of a flower, it can land on the stigma of another flower. This is another flower we are talking about. Right? From here, this pollen has landed on a different flower. Right? This could be of the same plant, it could be of a different plant, it doesn't matter. Alright? Same plant or that of a different plant of the same kind. It is called as cross-pollination. Right? It has to be the same kind, means I'm using your same species. Right? That means species means what? It is possible for interbreeding. Anyway, it is called as cross-pollination. Right? So that means if your pollen lands on a stigma that is not your own flower, that's of a different flower, be it of the same plant or a different plant, it doesn't matter. That is called as cross-pollination. Alright? You might ask this question, how does this process of pollination occur? Right? How do the pollens, they get transferred from the anther to the stigma? There are various ways in this it can occur. Remember, it can occur because of winds. Wind blowing could result in this pollen getting transferred from the anther to the stigma. Right? Second thing, remember, it could happen because of water. When it is raining, so water can act as a agent that carries pollen from the anther to the stigma. Right? It can also happen because of insects and birds and stuff. It's, for example, you might have heard this famous quote by Einstein where he said that if honeybees were to become extinct, humanity would be extinct in a matter of few years, right? Why does he say so? Why? Because remember, honeybees are also an important pollinator. What happens is, the honeybees, they are attracted to the anther, right? So they come over here, they are looking for nectar, etc. They come over here. So what do? They end up dusting themselves on these pollens. So pollens end up sticking to this honeybee. Next, the honeybee, it lands on the stigma, So what happens is the pollen is now getting transferred because of the honeybee, right? It is getting transferred from anther to the stigma. So that's why we call these animals, birds, etc. as pollinators. They are helping the transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma. Alright, this is how they are helping in the process of reproduction in plants. Alright, so it can also happen through other natural agents like wind, water, etc. Winds blowing can also blow some of the pollens from the anther to the stigma. Right? These are various ways it can happen. Alright. Let's now talk about the process called as fertilization. As I told you, pollination is occurring. That means the pollen, that is the male gamete from the anther, is reaching the female gamete that is present in the stigma, right? That is present in the pistil. The cell, right? So what is happening? So as you can see over here, the pollen grain has landed. After that, it starts making this pollen tube, right? This pollen tube extends and it is meeting this ovum or the female gamete, that is the egg. So when they are meeting, there is this process of fusion that is taking place. The cell which results after fusion of gametes is called as zygote, right? So the male gamete and the female gamete, they are fusing together. This is resulting in the formation of zygote. The process of fusion of male and female gametes is called as fertilization. Alright? This fusion of male and female gamete is called as fertilization. This results in something called as the formation of zygote. This zygote, you will see, later develops in an embryo. Okay? This zygote will later develop into an embryo. Alright? So let's talk about fruits and seed formation. The ovary, it grows into a fruit, while the other parts of the flower, it falls. Okay? As soon as the process of fertilization has occurred, I just showed you ovary. If you see over here, this is the ovary, right? This ovary of a plant, of a flower, what does it do? It grows into a fruit. So that means fruit is nothing but a ripened ovary. And the other parts of the flower, they end up falling off. All of them, they fall off. The fruit, as I told you, is nothing but a ripened ovary. This ovary starts to ripen over a period of time, and that is what we call as fruit. The seeds, it develops from the ovules, right? The seed that you get to see, it is developing from the ovules. The seed contains an embryo that is enclosed inside a protective seed coat, right? So the seed, inside it only embryo is lying. There's a very thick layer that is called a seed coat. Okay, this seed, it gets dispersed at multiple places, and these seeds, they grow under favorable conditions into brand new individuals. All right, this is what exactly happens in plants. This is how plants are able to sexually reproduce. All right, let me just summarize what are the various concepts that I discussed with you, right from the starting. So today I told you about reproduction in plants. I told you about vegetative parts of a plant. That means these are parts that are not involved in the process of reproduction. For example, root, stem, leaves, etc. These are called as vegetative parts of a plant. On the other hand, flower, I told you, is the reproductive part of a plant. I told you about the fact that flower has male parts, or it can have female part, or it can have both. Male part is called as stamen, female part is called as pistil, and sometimes you can have bisexual flowers. That means plant has both the male and female parts. I told you about two different types of reproduction. Remember, whenever I am telling you asexual reproduction, that means, remember, there is only a single parent that is involved, right? Single parent is involved. No fertilization is taking place. Since no fertilization is taking place, there is no seed formation. So that is the reason in asexual reproduction, plants give birth to the next generation plants without the use of seeds. On the other hand, in sexual reproduction, plants give rise to new plants with the seeds, right? Seeds, as I told you, are a product of fertilization. Fertilization means the fusion of the male gamete and the female gamete. If you need male gamete, female gamete, that means what happens? You require two parents. One is male and the other is female. Alright. Sometimes there is something called as parthenogenesis. In this, remember, when a suitable mate cannot be found, so what happens is male gamete, female gamete is produced by the same organism. Alright, that is very rare scenarios. That's a different thing I'll be taking up in a different topic. Alright, so usually in sexual reproduction, you will see there are two parents that are in. Alright, I told you about different types of asexual reproduction. We started with vegetative propagation. From the name itself, it is pretty obvious that this is a propagation or reproduction from the vegetative parts of the plant, right? Vegetative part means from roots, stem, leaves, etc. You can remember this picture. You can see this is a leaf. From here only new plants are emerging. There are some advantages, as I told you. They take less time to grow. They bear fruits and flowers much faster in comparison to those produced from seeds. Alright, and I told you, since a single parent is involved, the next generation plants are photocopies. They are literally exact copies of the parent. Then we talked about budding. I gave you the example of yeast cell where there is this formation of buds, and eventually when these buds mature, they break off and they become new individuals. Then we talked about fragmentation, which occurs in algae, which basically means an algae breaks up into multiple fragments, multiple pieces. Each of the fragment are pieces. They end up developing into new individuals. Next is spore formation. Through spores, the reproduction is happening, right? Then we shifted to sexual reproduction in plants. I told you about stamen, that is the male part, and the pistil, that is the female part. I told you if a plant has just pistil or stamen, it is called as unisexual flower. If it has both pistil and stamen, it is called as bisexual flower. I told you about the process of production of male gametes, which is nothing but pollen grains. Okay, pollen is produced. This is the male gametes, and you have the female gametes or the egg. Both of them have to fuse. For this, I told you there's this process of pollination that takes place. Pollination is nothing but transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma, right? So this process is called as pollination. I told you how various agents can act as pollinators. For example, winds are active pollinators, water can act as an agent of pollinator, insects and birds can also help in this process of pollination. Then I differentiated between self-pollination and cross-pollination, right? Then following that, we talked about the process called as fertilization, right, which is nothing but fusion of male gametes and female gametes, and I told you that the product of fertilization is called as a zygote, right? And this zygote, I told you, later develops into an embryo, and I told you this fruit is nothing but a ripened ovary. So after the process of fertilization, I told you that the ovary, it grows into a fruit, while the other parts of the flower, they end up falling off. I told you the fruit is nothing but a ripened ovary. The seed, it starts to develop from ovules, right? The seed, it contains an embryo which is enclosed in a seed protective coat. Then seeds, they get dispersed to different places, and under favorable conditions, you will see that this seed, it starts to germinate as new individuals. Alright, so this is all for today. I am going to be stopping here. In the next lesson, I will be talking about many concepts like electricity, electromagnetism, about soil formation, etc. So I hope to see you guys in the next class, which will be conducted in the tomorrow also at the same time. So other than this, as I told you, I teach live on Unacademy Plus. You can check out various courses by me. I usually teach science and technology and public administration, optional subject for the UPSC mains examination. You can check out, you can search for me. My name is Siva Prasad on the Unacademy platform. The link for my profile is also available at the bottom of this particular video. And if you plan to subscribe to Unacademy Plus, you can use my referral code, that is AKMSIVA, SIVA, and this will give you a 10% off on your Unacademy Plus subscription. So this is all for the day. Thank you so much for your patience. And if you really like the video, make sure that you are liking and sharing them. So thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.